don't remember.
That works out.
Coming to one up in less than 2 weeks.
Which is this one now? Oh, right, right. We were at the table, there was a bunch of y'all having dinner one night before or so. Somebody mentioned that.
Hi there.
And we checked into getting a bigger battery. You said, well, that was before.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
So I wanted to thank you all for coming today. This is actually the second in a series of community dialogues that the shareholder forum at the co-op has run. And the shareholder forum is a group of us that got banded together really to try to promote the co-op and to get more shareholders involved in running the co-op. So that's really who we are. And one of the things we're doing is, again, trying to have these community dialogues, and this is the second one. And today's topic is food justice, which I'll talk about in a moment. I'm Mike Sostak, and my tie to this is that I've been a co-op shareholder for about 16 years, ever since I came to Vermont, and I'm a former board member. And that's how I'm tied to this. We have snacks, as I said, and the snacks are thanks to Kathy Carr, who's right here, Catherine Barrett, who's right there, and Joe Compton, who's right there. So I appreciate you putting that together. Is there any comments you want to make about the food we have here? Yeah.
Well, in light of food justice, I purchased the food here. Some's organic, some's conventional. And as I was shopping, I take for granted that I can go downstairs and buy organic vegetables and I guess in light of food justice, just appreciating what those of us here, that we have this, that this store exists and that we have this option. And I did not write down the difference between the nutritional with the conventional versus organic. Maybe somewhere down the line we do something similar to that, but.
Next, I want to thank our panelists, and I'll go from this end around the table here, but first we have Chris McAvoy from Brattleboro Senior Meals, and Sabine, who's the general manager, Sabine Rhyne, general manager of our co-op. Then we have Brian McNeese, who I think the sole person running Bondview Farm. Is that correct? If I got that right? And then we have Rhianna Kendrick, who runs the drop-in center and associated with Groundworks here in Brattleboro. And then Vicky Senni, who's associated with Let's Grow Kids and I think some other things, which I assume you'll talk about. And then finally at the far end is Howard Prussack, whose farm is High Meadow Farm. So again, thanks to all the panelists for being here. When we came up with this topic, food justice, I kind of searched around and well, what does that mean? What does it mean? What does food justice mean? And if you do searches and go out on the internet, you'll find all kinds of different definitions of what it means. But the one I opted to just pick was the one that an organization called justfood.org uses. And that definition is: food justice is exercising the right to grow, sell, and eat healthy food. And healthy food is, they define as fresh, nutritious, affordable, grown locally with the care for the well-being of the land, workers, and animals. So I kind of put the key words up there from that definition I just talked about. I recognize that some people probably on the panel will say they don't even agree with that definition of food justice, and that's okay. I just purely put it out there as a way to kind of get the discussion going. I've asked each of the panelists to talk maybe for 5-10 minutes, whatever they're comfortable doing. Talk about food justice in terms of what they do. Again, we have representatives here from the senior aspects of our community, the children and kid aspects of our community, the farming aspects of our community, low-income part of our community. Hopefully that gives us a pretty broad spectrum of what's happening in our community. So if it's okay with you folks, I'd like to start with you, Howard, if that's all right, and kind of go around the table. And basically, I've given the panel 3 basic questions. Is what challenges do you have in terms of delivering whatever you do in terms of food justice? In other words, what are the challenges you have in producing healthy and affordable food or providing it to whoever you provide it to? And then what steps are you taking to meet those challenges, and any comments you want to make about how the community could help in doing that? Those are loosely structured questions, and again, the panel is free to really talk about things as they see fit to get their message across. So again, I'll turn it over to you, Howard, first.
All right, thanks. Thanks for inviting me to the panel and giving me a chance to vent or rant. But I've been working on this issue myself for the last few years, and it's been getting more defined and focused for myself. My definition of food justice is not quite what was on the paper, as Michael knows. My definition of food justice is more of fair contracts and pricing for farmers, fair wages and treatment of workers, safe working conditions, good environmental stewardship and organic practices, truth in the labeling, and food produced with dignity for human rights from farm to table. And the reason I'll start with that, because I was thinking about this last night, and I realized that there's more awareness and there's more information and posters upstairs or in any store that care more about whether the chickens are free range or not, as to whether or not the workers who are picking the vegetables are treated fairly. And I would say that the average person probably doesn't think about who's picking the strawberries, but they do want to ask questions on these chickens free range. You know, when you go to a restaurant, oh, is this salmon, humanely raised? Nobody ever asked, are these vegetables coming from a farm that paid living wages? So, as I said, this is becoming more and more defined in my mind as to what it really means. And it's not to cast blame on anybody. This is a developing issue, and I don't even know why all the reasons where we are where we are. But this is the reality. I've been farming for a long time, over 40 years, and it wasn't that big an issue. It was always for granted, well, farm workers and farmers in general, you're not going to make a lot of money. But I realized that's really disingenuous. And now that we're into, food is, well, everything's artisanal, and if I could stamp artisanal on my bags of carrots, I guess I could get a lot more money for them, hand-grown carrots. But in a sense, that's what we do, and that's what we've been doing for 40-something years, is doing hand-grown vegetables, except we didn't know enough to call it that. So it's real important to me, and why do I care about the issue? Well, I have people been working for me for 15 years now, loyal employees, And it's really important to me that they make a good living. And I have to pay them well. And we now have our average wage on the farm, it's $15 an hour. And, and then the taxes and the unemployment and all these other things. And just the state of, I'm running a small business and I happen to be a farm. And whether or not long range this is going to be sustainable for me to be paying more higher wages than other farms in the area, I'm not sure yet. I'll let you know better in the fall when I pay all the bills. But it's something that I can't look at my workers in the eye and think that they're working for like sub-minimum or wages that I know they can't live on. And yet there's a lot of farms in the area in the state of Vermont in general. Like 70% of the milk from the dairy farms, cows are being milked by, for the most part, immigrants from South America. Most of them are here illegally. Some of them pay probably close to minimum wage, but their conditions are pretty crappy, and they're living with the fear of they could be deported any time. So there's a lot of issues that we sort of ignore in Vermont. We think everything's beautiful. We think, well, you're buying your certified organic produce. What do you need to know? Well, that is a very low bar. I just got to tell you, certified organic does not address worker safety, workers' health, workers' employment at all. It doesn't really even address land stewardship at all. And I just tell you, I've been certified. I was the first certified farmer in Vermont, and nobody ever asked me how much am I paying my workers. All right, for all the times I've been certified, nobody really knows, what I'm doing on the farm as far as erosion control or land stewardship. I proudly tell them all the time, what I'm doing, but they don't really care. They're focused on their little certification checklist. Check it off, check it off, check it off. So when I say it's a really low bar, it's such a low bar that there are giant corporations out west who are selling certified organic spinach and lettuce and carrots and all the commodities, strawberries, and yet they're disastrous for their workers, because there's no difference whether their workers work on their commercial farms or their organic farms. They're treated the same. Luckily, they're working on the organic farm, so maybe they're not handling the pesticides. That's like the only bonus, I guess. But otherwise, they're paid the same. They're paid piece rate to pick the strawberries and the tomatoes, and it's not great work, and it's not easy work. And you just can't pluck somebody off the street and say, hey, go pick strawberries. These are very skilled people, who really know how to pick strawberries efficiently and pack them nice. You just can't find that kind of unskilled labor. So anyway, back to me. I don't even grow strawberries, but we do grow raspberries. And it's also important to me and the people on the farm that people afford our produce and our products. I'll hate to see a situation that we can't afford to grow the food and the people can't afford to buy it. And we seem to be heading, both things are happening at the same time. And that's a bit of insanity, that's happening. And how do we address that? And I'm not coming here with very many answers. I have a lot of questions. And I may have a half an answer here or there, but these are the issues that I deal with. It's very important. We give a lot of, whatever we can't sell, we give to the Gleanery Project, goes to the food bank. We gave them 6,000 pounds of daikons. I don't know, what, I think that could feed the whole state and then some, but that's what we had surplus of, and some other things. A lot of Napa cabbage, hopefully they did, I think they did something with that. So, how are we addressing the challenges of my farm, trying to give a decent income, not even a good income, but a decent living to our workers, and yet, and move forward. We're not even asking for more money. We don't want to raise our prices. Food's expensive. I'm a consumer too. I go shopping here all the time. Sabine sees me here. I'm at the Putney Co-op. I spend a lot of money in co-ops. So I know food's expensive. We're not trying to raise money, raise our prices at all. But there are things to help us with these challenges. And one of the things that community could do to help us would be to buy everything we produce. So we could be more efficient that way. So there's not like unsold produce at the end of the season, the end of the crop, and we're having to plow it in or find a home for it and give it away. As much as we like giving food away, I don't think, that doesn't help my workers particularly. And I get calls all the time, people want to volunteer, come over and work. I don't want volunteers working on the farm. It's very demeaning to my workers. You know, do you volunteer to count money at the bank to help them out? I don't think so. You know, volunteer to be, you know, help fix some water pipes in Brattleboro. But somehow, and I know people mean well, they really do, and I love me for it, but and again, because people aren't qualified. You think, oh, just show up and here's my body and I can help you on the farm. No, we have very skilled people. We use some dangerous equipment, you know, it's health, safety for the workers is important to me. So there are a lot of challenges, and I'm looking for answers as well. We're trying to become Vermont's first food justice certified farm. We were the first organic certified farm. The food justice bar is actually a lot higher to reach for me than it is to become to be certified organic. But we're trying. And thank you.
Thanks, Howard.
Patience.
I'm representing kids, mostly because I'm a grown-up kid, and I'm more comfortable with the 0 to 15 population than with adults, present company excluded, of course. So I work for Let's Grow Kids, and I have spent a lot of time here in Windham County working with kids, teachers, parents, and families around issues of food and nutrition through the Brattleboro Food Co-op here. So I'm going to lay down some basic brain science and costs that families with young children are faced with. 80% of the brain develops in the first 3 years and 90% by age 5. When does the rest of the brain develop? By, does anybody know? 25. Around there.
Or never.
Or never. So the reason I'm laying that as the foundation, because that's huge. By age 5, 90% of a person's brain is developed. So these are really critical years that we need to pay attention to. Over 70% of children under age 6 in Vermont have all available parents in the workforce, which means that in this critical age for brain development, for laying the foundation for success in relationships, in school, and in life, parents need to work to pay for food, rent, other bills, and they depend on care outside of the home. And that care is often hard to find and unaffordable. So this is the work of Let's Grow Kids. And I'm gonna move into food and hunger-free Vermont as I speak. More than 50% of Vermont's infants and toddlers who are likely to need care outside of the home don't have access to high-quality, affordable programs. Parents are spending 40% of their income on child care alone, and some of them more. Some of them hand over nearly their entire paycheck. And the economics are no better for child care providers in Vermont, who earn on average $24,000 per year. Many of them are earning minimum wage, and some providers make even less than minimum wage because they end up subsidizing parents and providing food for kids out of their own pocket. This is an economic issue for everyone, not just parents with young kids and caretakers. Vermont's economic prosperity relies on our most important asset, Vermonters, as Howard was talking about. Employers need a stable workforce, and employers such as this one, the Brattleboro Food Co-op, also depend on people to have money in their pocket to buy food here. Research shows that every dollar invested into early childhood programs yields $7 to $10 in return. Consistent investment throughout life is important, of course, but dollar for dollar, early interventions yield a much higher rate of return. Investment in our youngest children can mitigate future costs in public education, healthcare, and corrections. Children with high quality early experiences, including nutrition, are 40% less likely to need special ed or to be held back a grade, and 70% less likely to commit a violent crime by age 18. So when we take care of our youngest kids, we're cutting costs in the future. So let's bring this back to food, because when we talk about brain development, we have to talk about what nourishes our brain and bodies, aside from the social and emotional stuff, which is food, nutrition. So as a former educator for the BFC, I spent a lot of time in classrooms, and it's easy to see right away that kids cannot learn if they're hungry. 1 in 4 children in Windham County are food insecure, which is a really nice way of saying hungry. This number, by the way, would go up if we included the number of kids that don't have access to nutritious and wholesome food. 48% of our grade school and high school students are eligible for free and reduced price meals, which is based on family income. For too many families, it's hard to afford enough healthy food. Living in poverty is very expensive and time-consuming, and you're always trying to catch up. The cost of childcare alone means that parents with young children are facing really tough choices, and for some, accessing resources and social services is a full-time job, especially when you don't have transportation. People are taking the bus, running around, just trying to get food, just trying to get, any of the social services that they qualify for. And it takes sometimes 40 hours a week to just do that. That said, it's hard to afford and prepare enough healthy food, which is why meals at school are so important, and access to high quality, affordable childcare where food is served is also critical. So many kids are getting most of their nutrition at school: breakfast, snack, lunch, after school snack. And thanks to organizations like Hunger Free Vermont and Food Connects and the Farm to School program, our kids are being fed in school, and those meals are becoming increasingly healthier and actually more local. Children living in food insecure homes are at greater risk for poor health, nutritional deficiencies, and obesity, as well as developmental delays, poor academic achievement, depression, increased aggressive or hyperactive behavior. I personally turn into the Hulk when I'm hungry. I don't know about you. Imagine being a kid, not having a choice whether you're hungry or not, being in school and being asked to sit down and learn. If we want healthy, thriving communities and vibrant local economies, then this is everybody's issue. I'm a lover of Southern Vermont and a strong believer that we can do things differently here. The co-op motto is stronger together, and it's true. At a time when only 64 people own more than 50% of the world's wealth, we need to see each other as comrades, as a community, and in solidarity. We need to take care of each other, have these conversations in the same room more often, and continuously improve together. That global view, 64 people owning more than 50% of the world's wealth, is important because we don't live in a vacuum. It isn't any one person's fault. People on welfare aren't lazy. It's a system that divides us, and it creates perpetual poverty. It's not enough to do the same thing all the time as we've been doing with federal programs, nonprofits begging for money, and encouraging poor people to shop in bulk when they don't have the upfront costs to do so. So we need a constant flow of ideas and information about what's going on in our community, which is why I really appreciate this panel. Kids are hungry, seniors are hungry, and we have to act immediately and with urgency. Our successes and our failures are bound together. What's going on at the co-op affects what's going on at Groundworks Collaborative. What goes on in the schools affects what goes on in local businesses, and so on. The only solution I see is to come together around poverty. Everyone is responsible, everyone has a stake, and hunger is a symptom of poverty. We need to be fed before we can do anything else. So I propose that we start with hunger so that we can be nourished enough to tackle housing and transportation and jobs and income. One of the biggest barriers is stigma. Parents, just like seniors, aren't accessing food stamps when they're eligible, and they're not accessing free and reduced lunch because they're ashamed, because as a society we stigmatize these programs. But we need eligible families to enroll in these programs because, for example, if 50% or more of the students in a school are enrolled, then all children in the community become eligible for 2 free meals a day, all summer long, anywhere where meals are provided. And I have information about summer meals and all this stuff. Summer meals are important because, like I said earlier, kids' most reliable source of nutrition is at school. And so when vacation starts, so does hunger. So I could say a lot more, but I'll probably stop there. And also encourage people to join the Hunger Council of Windham County, which meets quarterly at the Marlboro Grad Center, and I'm happy to give you more information. And my hope is that we would become the largest, most diverse council in the state. There are councils all over the state. It's already pretty big. There's anywhere from 20 to 40 people at that table. Some of you in the room are there. And I think together we can come up with ways through our community voices to make real change for every kid, every person in Windham County. Yeah, thanks. I'll pass it over to
Rhianna.
Rhianna.
So I represent the Groundworks Drop-In Center, which is part of Groundworks Collaborative. And for those of you that don't know, Groundworks Collaborative is made up of the Brattleboro Area Drop-In Center and Morningside Shelter after we merged last June. And one of the largest programs at the Drop-In Center is our food shelf. So although I represent essentially the low-income population, we actually serve an entire community without income restrictions on people accessing the food shelf. One of our big barriers is that we need to have enough food sourced to be able to serve the folks that we see. So we see about 1,000 people a month through the food shelf. And we're open 3.5 days a week only. So there's days where we see as many as 120 people that are coming through the food shelf, and those represent oftentimes large families of 4 and more. We primarily access food through the Vermont Food Bank. So we have a contract that allows us to buy food in bulk. And then we also have other ways to access, like the co-op. Through grants and partnerships, we're able to access as much healthy food as we possibly can. We work with the local supermarkets to access day-old food and produce to be able to serve as many people as possible. The ongoing constraint for us is to be able to have enough food for the folks that we're serving. We last June moved our food shelf from inside the building to our garage space, which allowed us to serve more people a day, which immediately added additional constraints to the amount of food that we needed to be able to serve the folks that were coming through. So the reoccurring theme for us is not having enough food, which is what the folks that we serve face. So our tagline is basic needs met with dignity, and food is a basic need. I think I would go as far as to even say that it's a public health issue. So nutritious food is essential for people to be able to function. So we work in a variety of ways to address the challenges that we see. We partner with folks like the Hunger Council, the Healthy Harvest Network, the co-op. The Vermont Food Bank is a huge supporter. In addition to the fact that we purchase bulk food, we also are able to obtain an awful lot of raw salvage, which sounds awful, but really it's a kind of combination of items that come in that allow us to keep our food shelf stocked. In terms of what the community can do, I think that's a really challenging question, and I think, like Howard, I have more questions than I really have answers. The way that we're able to support our food shelf is predominantly through volunteer support. So on any given day, we have at least 5 volunteers that allow us to serve the sheer number of people that come through the food shelf. So volunteer support is crucial for us. I think that folks joining the Hunger Council, as Vicky said, is also incredibly important. People that are involved in those conversations helps us to propel the conversation forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
We produce mainly eggs at this point, about 100 dozen a week to the co-op, and it's organic, and they're pastured during the summer. And we also produce beef, grass-fed beef, and meat chickens. Fairly small scale, about 9 beef and maybe a couple hundred meat chickens per year. And in terms of the questions, what I'd like to do is just read the question, and I have a little response to it. But what challenges do you face in providing or producing healthy and affordable food for the people you serve? The main thing is the challenge is making sure that the land inputs, for example, fertilizer, seed, and lime, are good short and long term for the soil at an affordable price When I first got into this years ago, I'm a geologist by training, I started doing a little research on fertilizers and was astonished to find out what was in the fertilizers. And so after doing a lot of research, I sort of ended up choosing certain fertilizers that were sort of the best combination of affordability and, you know, minimal sort of odd chemical formulas in them. For example, I found out that some of the commercial fertilizers had a fair amount of fluoride in them, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's one of the things that you don't really want to keep adding to your soil year after year. So I ended up ruling out certain fertilizers on the aspect of that. So I spent a lot of time doing research, which is one advantage of being a geologist. Also, I wanted to make sure the feed inputs are good for the animals and by extension for us. For example, no chemical or biological issues, no plastic issues like the Teflon issue in the water, things like that. So I had to be careful about what plastics I used. You know, I tended to avoid things, you know, like PVC, polyvinyl chloride. I tried to stick with polyethylene, which is a little more inert, has less plasticizers in it. And another challenge was trying to raise money for these inputs, because some of the inputs are very long term. For example, one of my fields I cleared from woods, and it took years. I cleared about 8 acres. And it was a multi-year process, you know, with multiple applications of lime and manure, and to get them to the point of producing. And so it was all outlay for years before I saw anything out of it. And so the steps I'm taking to address these challenges, I'm constantly doing research on products to determine which are best for the soil and the animals. I'm doing everything feasible within my production method to make sure the animals are happy and healthy. For example, they're outside as much as possible, minimum stress, minimum hazards, you know, minimum toxins of any sort. And I'm also trying to cut costs where possible. For example, I buy in bulk, you know, a pallet load of egg cartons, which is a lot of egg cartons. 3,720 actually. I share machines with neighbors to cut costs, and I have all used machinery. My newest tractor is a 1998. My other tractor is a 75. And what could the community do to help address these challenges? Well, you know, it comes down to be willing to support the price that I need to get to produce the food. Every month or so I do sort of a cost analysis on the eggs and the beef. And for example, the beef, as long as everything goes well, I cover my costs and make about $4 an hour for my time. The chickens, the eggs, I make about $6 an hour. So I don't even make minimum wage. I don't really know where else to cut costs. You know, I'm doing everything possible to do that and still produce a really good quality food that my family would be happy to eat. I'd be happy having my family eat. You know, one possibility is that, you know, maybe people could be a little more flexible about the food. For example, I produce 200 to 300 stew hens a year because the chickens, the laying hens, last about a year, and then you have to slaughter them. And so I end up with stew hens. They're, you know, 2 to 3 pounds. And it turns out the way I can get the best money for them is to grind them into dog food myself, because no one's willing to buy stew hens. And this year I experimented a little bit. I had the slaughterhouse, the one slaughterhouse I was able to find to do it. They actually separated the meat from the stew hens, which they don't like doing because they're pretty tough, and they ground and made sausage out of it as an experiment. And then what I did is I turned all the rest of the material into dog food, just ground it up. And the strange thing is you can get more money for dog food than you can for human food. And these are all organic stew hens. So I end up with hundreds of pounds of stew hens. And, if there was a way for, some way for me to be able to sell that, I'd be able to sell it more reasonably. Or maybe for meat cuts to be smaller amounts of meat and do a different way of producing, like cooking them, like, the Japanese way of cooking, where you just basically use the meat as a flavoring. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Howard. Sabine?
So, I think that the challenges in providing healthy food come down to three, in a very simplistic way. One is the cost of food. As you've heard here, it costs more to produce food than most of us feel comfortable spending for the actual value of them, of the product. And this is born from years and years of misguided federal subsidies to commodity crops, which have created everything made of corn. I saw a statistic recently that was that 75% of federal subsidies for food go to 10% of the farms in the U.S. It's commonly called the Great Corn Caper. And incidentally, talking about artisanal carrots and so on, I think, or eggs for that matter, I think it's quite easy to see how this happens when a loaf of Wonder Bread is made with the help of additives from flour to loaf in less than 2 hours, while an artisanal bread takes 30 hours. So the value of that person's time, the ingredients that go into it, and so on and so forth, all add up to a cost. The second cost is cost of time. I think for those of us for whom healthy food is a priority, it takes time to research what it is, to understand how to cook it, to shop for it, to prepare it healthfully. It takes time. And for people that are on assistance of various kinds and are working multiple jobs, time is as much of a scarce commodity as anything else. And finally, to me anyway, it's the meaning of local investment. And I think for many of us, when we're reduced to, in our hierarchy of needs, to figuring out how we're going to get our next meal, it's hard to figure out that even though we're only paying $1 for that value-priced item off the McDonald's menu, that none of that money ultimately gets recycled into our community, which doesn't help our situation or our neighbor's situation or our children's situation down the road. That it's, all of those resources just go out into the ether, whether it's through a supermarket that's owned in Belgium or whether it's God knows what. But I think those three things are what ultimately separate us from having a reasonable food policy in our country. So it's big. And for us as a co-op, it's pretty hard to exist in a situation that's so completely stilted towards a very different economic framework than what we wish to support. So for us, we try to do things on a, I think a person from the National Co-op Grocers said it well, it's value and values. So what we really try to think about is providing good value and talking about values in the production and the care of the food. And sometimes people don't have the wherewithal to be able to acknowledge that because they're in such dire straits. But for a lot of people, they do take the time to figure this out as best they can. And so in our very small way, we try to support them by focusing on pricing, by really trying to, recently we've made a pretty big effort in trying to streamline our promotions, really trying to have everyday low prices on basic foods throughout the store. We cut our margins on those things. We really try to make them more available. We obviously, because we're a shareholder work model co-op, we try to help people with that opportunity if they have the time to work a few hours a month, as those of you here know well. We have the Food for All program, which we've been talking a lot about over the last 2.5 or 3 years, which is this little item here, which basically acknowledges the lack of time and the lack of means for people that are on food assistance, and so we extend a 10% discount to folks that are on assistance with an annual check-in. And one little difference that we've proposed as part of this is that they become owners of the co-op, just like all of us do. That empowerment in becoming a part of an organization that actually talks about value and values and really tries to walk the walk as best we can is part of the package. And we extend that buy-in period over twice as long as for everyone else, so that the cash flow can be a little bit easier. But we made that a stipulation because we felt like it was part of it. It's not just about accessing food, it's about accessing power. And then finally, we do things like, and I asked Anna to come join us today to personify the Pennywise Pantry in really helping people figure out how to shop the co-op most efficiently, finding out how to find those values, finding out how to use the bulk department for people that aren't familiar with it, for whom it's a scary thing, where they can actually buy small amounts of very nutritious and very voluminous grains that will actually feed them much better than the aforementioned dollar menu item. Obviously we make all kinds of workshops and classes available to people to, again, familiarize them with the possibility of eating differently and better. Acknowledging that it's a difficult task and it takes a lot of time and effort. What could the community do to better address these challenges? I mean, I don't, what can any of us say to that question? I think, for those of you that are here and for whom this is important, I think actually being a bridge to folks that may need some assistance in coming in and looking at some different ways of cooking. That may not know us, but they know you, and they might come in with you and have a conversation about, why quinoa might actually be a better solution than rice, or something like that, or why a local farm is a better place to buy something from than some place halfway across the world. Think about whether that senior discount is really necessary. Perhaps if you don't really notice a difference between 8% and 10%, perhaps the co-op could supply more of the needs-based discounts over time if we have fewer folks with means collecting the 10% senior discount. Volunteer to cook with a group of friends for the overnight shelter, through a time that the co-op can provide the food once a month or something like that. Really get involved in bridging the gap as best you can. Making sure that everyone knows as best you can of what all of these options are that are available for folks to be able to distribute them throughout the community in places where people may not see them yet. So those are just a few ideas that I had about how you could help or how the community could help.
Thanks, Sabine. And Chris.
Yes. Well, I run the senior meals program. We deal with the other end of the spectrum. We deal with people 60 and over. I run two basic programs, the Meals on Wheels, which is delivered to people in the community, and the congregate dining, which is a meal prepared and served at the Brattleboro Senior Center. The only stipulations that we have for people to partake in this program is that they're over 60 and that they exhibited some kind of food insecurity, which is that word that pops around in the hunger field a lot. So it's there. I am the conduit for federal funds of the Older Americans Act, and that's how I can serve these meals, and I can pay a cook and I can pay myself, and I can pay dishwashers. But the rest of the program, I'd say about 90% is run by volunteers. I have volunteer meal delivery drivers, I have volunteer meal packers, I have volunteer people who handle the money, and a volunteer board. So we try to keep our costs down as much as we can. Like in any other small program, our biggest cost is our paying our employees. The second largest one is buying food. We serve around 145 meals a day. Right now, this is the highest I've seen my census in a while. We're serving about 85 meals on wheels, and the other day we had 145, not 100, excuse me, we had 65 people come in for lunch. So we don't really know who's coming in for lunch. We don't have a specific way, and magic, I think, is, or you kind of, it's an educated guess how many people we're gonna serve on any given day. And so, given all that, the federal government, through the Older Americans Act, provides money, and it comes to us through Senior Solutions. We also get some money from the state. And what it boils down to, for every eligible meal that I serve, which is to a person over 60 that exhibits food insecurity, I get a certain amount of money. I get more money if the meal has to go on the road than if someone comes in to eat it, because they feel that it takes less preparation and less cost to serve a meal hot, as opposed to wrapping it up and sending it out. The issue that I find, well, there's several issues. One of the biggest ones is that, given all the overhead that we have, it costs about $7 to prepare one meal. That's on the average. And that includes all of our costs. The other issue, and the program that we make up the extra, the money that we actually get, which is probably, we get a little over 50% from the government. The rest of that money comes from participant donations, a good portion of that, and through fundraising. So basically the position that my nonprofit is in is that we have to constantly be thinking about the bottom line. The other issue that I'm finding is the program was designed to be a one-size-fits-all. Today we are serving chicken. That is what we are serving. Or today we're having spaghetti and meatballs, and I'm sorry that you don't eat gluten, but I don't have an alternative today. So it's very difficult, because there are certain, I'm seeing that more and more people are having more medical issues and a lot of lifestyle choices that we cannot accommodate. And that's one of the things that the federal funds don't account for. So, it's difficult. So basically, we serve the over 60 population. Some of them are in more need than others. I only ask a donation, I don't charge anybody. It is also very interesting to see that I get, if I ask for $3.50 per meal, I don't necessarily bring that in. At the end of the day, the average donation for someone who comes in the door is $2.30. At the end of the day, the average meal that is delivered, the donation is $1.33. So we have this big gap that we have to work very hard so that we continue to serve people. And that's one of our biggest challenges. And the other is trying to provide food that meet people's dietary needs. And dietary needs are so diverse that it really, it's a challenge to be able to do that. Some of the things that we've done to meet this challenge is we've joined a buying club or a buying group where many different businesses that purchase food go in together, and we get a lower cost on some items, and that's helped us a little bit. We also portion control. That the government says that the proper amount for 1/3 of your daily requirements is between 2 to 4 ounces for a protein. That's how much we give you, is 2 to 4 ounces. The second helpings are not happening for the most part. And the other thing is that we're only really there to give 1/3, so 1 meal a day. We have expanded a little bit and do breakfast twice a week. So, it's for people who are really in dire straits. Sometimes the Meals on Wheels or the congregate meal is the only meal they get for that day. And we get people that come in and look very hungry, and our hands are tied. Just because the numbers that we are seeing are very, very large right now, and at some point we will reach our upper capacity if they continue to grow. And then at that point, I don't know what to do. We have also cut staff hours. We're really trying to keep our head above water, and it's a challenge. As far as what the community can do, just be aware that we're out there. Be aware that we will send you a letter, or we'll try anyway. And we occasionally we'll ask for donations. We do utilize things like the food bank. Vermont Food Bank is helpful for us in getting items to cook with. We also utilize the gleaning programs. So we're doing the best we can.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. Okay, I really appreciate the panel. In fact, give a round of applause. Really open it up to the audience now for questions, comments, or even amongst panel members if you have.
I think I'll go kill myself.
Yes.
Spoon and Davy, I've heard there isn't anything that anybody said that wasn't worthwhile, and was good to hear. A lot of things resonated. Most everybody said something that resonated. I picked out three things I heard that were stronger together. What can the community do to address problems, and accessing power are three of the things. The community can do everything you want. Has always been able to do everything you wanted. Never has, is not doing it now, and may never, but it can. So it's not a question of what can it do, it can do everything. And the community actually met yesterday and made a decision that it was wiser to spend $6 million on a police station to make sure that the community is safe from the people who may act badly if they get hungry, or they don't have a job, or have other health problems or something like that, than it was to actually address those problems. And it's the same decision that the community makes every single year. I see there were 3 people here that were part of that community. Probably could have been a lot more people here that were a part of that community. Probably could be a majority of people that think progressively that could have been a part of that community, which is our community, and made different decisions. What I'm saying is awareness is helpful. Everything that everybody's doing is worthwhile and needs to keep happening, and awareness needs to keep growing, but none of it is going to get you anywhere, as it never has, because you're talking about a political decision. We as a community, as a region, as a state, it's the state that controls all of the resources. And it would be that way, even if we overthrew the state, we would just have to create a different one, and that different one would be doing the same thing. So this is the way it will always be until we all live independently in little tiny tribes, maybe. I don't know, but even the tribes make decisions like this. So what I'm saying is everything you do, you need to continue doing what you're doing, but you also have to be working on a political solution, because there is no other route. And if you want to know how to go about doing that, Ellen will. She says no, but she has all the information. She knows where to get all the challenges.
Thank you, Spoon. Joe?
Thank you. I brought something. This, I think, follows Spoon's speech is on the edge of despair and deserves to be. Howie is imagining a world in which not only farmers all make a living, but farm workers make a living. And farm workers, non-landowning farm workers, have never made a living anywhere. And it's wonderful that anyone is imagining this for the future. I brought this thing. I've been trying to polish this rant, and I'm going to spit it out. Because the federal government certifies organic food while allowing food to be produced and traded at lower standards, it is inevitable that 1, organic food carries luxury prices. 2, many consumers who are compelled to buy the cheapest available food, including not only poor people, but most food service businesses, which must compete with each other, cannot use organic food. 3, most of our food is produced to lesser standards than the organic standards. All this even though most people now seem to consider organic food the only actually nutritious food. Is it right that we should be satisfied with the mere opportunity to buy organic food? No. In allowing food to be produced to less than organic standards, we are complicit in waste of the commons, torment of agricultural workers and animals, and compromised health for our neighbors and descendants, if not ourselves. What must be done? We must change our national laws. Roughly speaking, there must be organic food for all. There must be no other kind of food legally produced. Who will help? Who will create lobbies to buy legislative interest in this? No representatives of big food, including the organic industry. Because organics for all means no more organics, and organics are good business. I'm no politician. I cannot prescribe the whole winning strategy for this political campaign, but I am sure the food co-ops ought to help. Because these are all the people of the food co-ops are interested in this, and they're in communication with each other. Either they are or they could be. And they could run a cheap political campaign like the Sanders campaign for this issue. Thank you.
Well, I've got a short response to that.
Yeah.
All right.
One, Vermont's put its stamp on the map as far as the GMO issue, and it looks like we're winning. And we're the first state, and it's going to ripple throughout the entire food industry. General Mills, basically all the major food companies are throwing in the towel, and they're going to be adapting at least labeling laws. It doesn't mean that they're going to use non-GMO ingredients, but it's consumer interest might drive it that way. Campbell's announced that they are going to switch completely to GMO-free ingredients over the next 2 years. So, you know, that's a baby step, but what you're saying can happen if consumers want it to happen. Just like a community could decide, we could decide what we want, you know, and make it so. And consumers have a lot of power if they choose to. But I agree with you, the organics for all, organics has always been a pricey niche driven by cost. Again, I don't have any solutions to that, you know. Should there be allowed to be cheap food produced that's cheap in the short run? I guess so. I'm not gonna be the one to say everybody's gonna have to pay more. There's no one who's gonna be able to do that.
Oh, I'd like to say that when you change one term of an equation, the other terms change. You know, the world is going to flip around so quickly now. I don't think that there will be any employed truck drivers in 20 years. I think that robots are going to do all this work. I hope that those truck drivers can pick strawberries because the robots would just never be sensitive enough to pick strawberries. I think that the whole world changes, and if all food must be produced artisanally, we return to a model where, like 60% of people are full-time in food.
That's, yeah.
And I'll shut up.
Probably not gonna happen, but.
Okay.
I'm wondering if anyone in this room is aware of sort of role models, other communities that have a specific policy or have programs that have addressed some of what the panel has talked about in an effective way that we don't have happening here right now?
Yeah, well, it's called Cuba. They've addressed the issue of senior nutrition and children nutrition and farmers' well-being, and it's pretty interesting, and it's not talked about yet. Well, the media likes to show us pictures of old cars driving through Havana, and they haven't gotten down and dirty into what the social fabric of Cuba is. But it's much more advanced than anything that the media is reporting on. But all of the farms have contracts with seniors and schools, and there's a direct relationship between seniors and schools and farms, and they acknowledge that's like the two most important things are the kids and the responsibility that seniors get fed. And we don't talk about it here except in these little meetings, but that's the only thing that I've seen. Like, I don't know anything about any of the states in this country, but Cuba's very progressive that way, and I'm hoping this knowledge and experience is going to come back here as doors open up to Cuba.
So Ellen had her hand up, and then Maria.
So I just have a very short observation on what I feel like everybody touched on, and then sort of anybody's response from the panel to it. To me, one of the threads through everybody's, not surprisingly through everybody's presentation, was poverty, and that the fact that we have such intense poverty and high both amounts of impoverished people and the level of poverty is so deep is like at the core of the problem. And then on the flip side, like listening to Howie talk about, am I gonna be able to act, like he's providing wages that are not poverty wages, but then am I gonna actually be able to afford to run my business that way? That remain, So I guess I'm just interested in the thoughts of anybody who wants to on the panel about the larger issue of coming together to address poverty. If anybody cares to respond.
Well, I'll just throw a little bit out in terms of addressing the issue, which is that we just surveyed 700 and something customers in the store and asked a whole lot of questions. And without fail, the number one thing that people want in a store is cheap food. They want lower prices. It trumps everything else. And these are the same people, perhaps, that are sitting in this room, talking about the problem with you know, getting food to the folks that need it the most. And I think, you know, we can't have it both ways. We can't be stewards of a community and really not invest in our farmers and in our local food production system if we want to change anything about what's going on a very small scale. Never mind on a large scale. I mean, I can't even imagine some of the things that are mentioned here today. It's amazing. But I think that's, you know, within our own selves, we have to look at this, I think, and really think about how we make our own choices day to day and what the ramifications of those choices are. Never mind policy, never mind everything else. That's one reaction to what you said.
I think I would just address the fact that the view on poverty, and there was a couple of mentions about the stigma of the systems that people are supported by, and Vermont is commonly viewed as a state that has better systems than most states, which I do find to be true. And at the same time, those very systems are what enable people to live continuously in poverty. And without any changes to the systems that people live in, the conversation really doesn't change. It just is a continuous cycle.
Yeah, Vermont's one of the best. It shows how low the bar is.
Right.
Okay, with the best of a rotten bunch of states, you know. And we are, like, we're childhood, you know, health and you know is good in Vermont. I think is maybe we're number one. I meant to add about the Cuba thing. Farmers give for free the produce to the seniors and to the schools. That's part of the social contract, that the farmers want to show that they're giving back to the community in return for the community supporting the farmers. So it's part of this contract that's developed, this two-way street. The farmers acknowledge, you know, how the community supports them, and they're giving back directly to their local schools and their local senior centers. And I just, you know, again, that's something that hopefully that knowledge will come out. Interesting.
So you had your hand up for a while.
I have two comments, part of it in response to your question. A Vermont response to Cuba more. I wonder, I happen to know something about Greensboro, Vermont, with Jasper Hill Farm, with Pete Johnson up in Hardwick, that area. There is a lot going on up there to have farmers working with producers, with farmers, well, because Jasper Hill, because they're dealing with cheese, they're working with mostly cow raising, dairy farms. There we go. But they've partnered with Blake Hill for the making of jams that they sell. They're encouraging a communal focus on farming and bringing the land back in Vermont. So I'm wondering about exploring that as, you know, that area, and I'm sure there's more going on up there. I know just something about that area. I wonder, as a bringing that back to the Brattleboro community, I'm thinking about you with your stew hens. Well, stew hens produce pretty damn good stock. Mm-hmm. Chicken feet produce pretty damn good stock. How often does this happen? Would it be possible to somehow get enough stock pots to use those chickens to produce stock that could produce soups, you know, stock for you for producing meals in these things? Could we figure that out somehow?
Oh heck, put all the bones in that pot.
You know, get the. I mean, it seems to me that maybe there is a way to, if you put a price on it, that would, maybe there is a way, you know, whatever it costs for dog food, or a little more, whatever. But would that be a way where we could get some of this kind of thing working together?
Yeah, there's a lot of really good meat in the
Exactly.
chickens.
I
I mean, it's
mean,
all
it
organic.
really-
They're 18 months old or so.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's
you
about
just
500
cook them
pounds a
long
year.
and slowly, right? I mean,
I can vouch for the stew hens. Brian is my meat provider.
so
And-
it just seems to me that perhaps that kind of working together might be, and I do know one farm that is this year gonna be big enough to start wanting to have produce and would like it to go to community things. It's the networking,
Yeah.
you know, and how to get that going. I mean, if this could be a beginning of that, that would be pretty exciting.
I think there's a lot of ideas like that, and they're really interesting and could certainly work to aid a community in need. But I also feel like these are all Band-Aids on a way bigger issue of poverty. And it's a political issue. I mean, we live in a system that perpetuates poverty, and we're all part of it. And as Vermont, as much as we want to not be part of the rest of the world, we are. And I think, you know, one thing, you know, Howard's paying $15 an hour. That's this is a countrywide conversation that we all need to be having, and we need to be having it and pushing for it here in Vermont. And I know that businesses will say, I can't afford to pay my workers $15 an hour. Then you need to become political, and you need to start advocating as a business for the support to be able to pay workers $15 an hour. People cannot live on minimum wage, and a lot of people are making less than minimum wage or not making any money at all. We need to raise the minimum wage. That's, you know, one thing I think we could all be working together on.
May I respond?
Sure, sure.
I work with a type of healthcare that goes to that level of care and doesn't use Band-Aids except when there is an emergency. And if there is an emergency in the community, Band-Aids can be really useful.
Absolutely.
And stitches can be really useful. So if we could stitch together something to help tide over and deal, not either or, but and deal from the other end, it seems to me that might be, it might be exciting to have Brattleboro take that on, to feel some success somewhere where they can, because everybody goes, poverty. You know, poverty is huge.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
we do need to do that, but, you know, one step with success can.
Well, we have to work in the system while we fight against it.
Exactly.
For sure. We need to
It's-
take care of people.
It's and, it's not but. It's
Exactly.
not either or, it's
I agree.
and, this and that.
Yeah. And there are creative solutions. And I think we really ought to, if we're meat eaters, be making stock with those bones. I mean, that's like a treasure.
Well,
That's like gold.
exactly. I mean, it is a treasure. It's an
And I
incredible
wanted to
treasure.
say about the stew hens, it's kind of off this topic, but they're amazing. And they have this bright yellow fat in them, which you just know that these
Yeah.
hens were taken care of, and they were eating grass most of the time. I mean, it's really quite amazing and super affordable, especially if you're buying direct from farmers. So that's a little note on Brian's
That's-
chickens.
A lot of the small egg producers around this area, I've asked them what they do with their spent hens, and a lot of them just send them to the auction and get $1 a bird and regard it as good, you know.
So, wouldn't it be, I'll get involved with that. What a fun place to
Brian,
to
you know,
deal with, but-
the pet food you mentioned pet food. The pet food market is a bigger market than baby food market in this country. So, yeah, people will spend more money on pets than they will on baby food. Maybe there's more pets than babies, but I just always thought that was an amazing, you know, statistic. The other thing I want to address is nutrition and poverty in Vermont. 2 years ago, the Extension Service did an exhaustive survey and study on how can we get more people to eat nutritious food in Vermont, especially vegetables, and what are the impediments to it? Well, it was quite a surprise. You know what the biggest impediment to getting low-income Vermonters to eating more vegetables, and no, I doubt anyone here would guess it.
Access.
Dental. They don't have good teeth. If you don't have good teeth, how are you gonna chew a carrot? Okay? So you get back to poverty. They don't have good teeth. Why? Well, they're poor. And guess what? Even the state, health programs don't cover dental, all right? So these are basic issues that aren't ignored in most of the known world, except in the United States. So, you got a real problem. People aren't gonna eat vegetables, they don't have teeth. That's why they eat the crap they eat, because it's soft. The other thing is schools, the school systems. Schools don't have kitchens. How are they gonna cook vegetables? But they have a steam oven so they could prepare the tater tots that they get from the USDA commodity program. That's what they have. They also don't have the money to pay staff. I think they're allocated $1.25 for a lunch for a child in this county. $1.25. That's supposed to pay for the food for a child in this county. It's unbelievable. What can you get for $1.25? Not a lot. So they're just basic, fundamental things that Band-Aids are great if you're bleeding, and I wish we could come up with some really useful Band-Aids, but we've got a lot of there's trouble in River City, and we got a lot of problems, but we also have we're smart people. Why can't we figure these answers out? We're a room full of really smart people here. And one last thing I wanted to touch on, because it's a hot topic I've been seeing for years, is sustainable farming. Everybody, oh yeah, we want to have sustainable farming, Well, you can't have, and this comes back to my favorite topic, you can't have sustainable farming if you don't have sustainable workers. Somebody's got to work on these farms. It's not in the, out in the ozone sustainable farming. There's got to be workers who know what they're doing to sustain the farm. So that's sort of, it's the bigger picture that I'm trying to bring light to.
I'll take a risk and plug a movie here, Where to Invade Next. I don't know if anyone's seen that. But there are ideas in that movie that pertain to what we're talking about here, very much so. And unfortunately, that title of the movie is kind of deceiving, because you think about, he's talking about our country invading somebody. He's really not. He's talking about what can we learn from other countries to bring back. So, but I encourage you to see that movie if you're looking for some really good ideas. Let's see, Marlene, you haven't spoken yet.
I was wondering how you could say more about how in Cuba.
I'm not an expert on Cuban politics or systems, but I spent 3 weeks there, but what's the question? I'll do my best.
My question is, you said about the farmers have a contract with the community, and so they.
It's a social contract. There's two contracts. Here's how.
Wait,
you want to ask a question?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the farmers give free food to the seniors and kids.
Schools. Yeah.
And what do they get? What's their end of the social contract that they get?
Well, they get free health care.
Okay.
It's what every Cuban gets, free unlimited health care, free schooling through college. They get all the benefits that Cuban society gives. They're not getting any special things. Well, there are some special things for farmers. I'll take that back. If a farmer, or anybody, not even farmers, say if you're a teacher, you decide to become a farmer, you know of some unused land, you could apply to the government. They'll give you the land as long as you put it back into production. So part of the contract is that the farmer supplies the local community center, the schools, with the produce from that farm. That, as well as then the government buys, they do a contract with the farm to buy, say you want to grow dry beans. The government will give you a contract for 5,000 pounds of dry beans at 10 cents a pound. Well, the farmer meets that contract, the 5,000 pounds, but if he grows 6,000 pounds, more than the contract, now has that 1,000 pounds, he could sell to anybody for more money. like restaurants, all these little independent restaurants that are opening up. So that's how the farmers are doing it. They fill the government contract. Anything above that they could sell on the free market that's created now. So that's why farmers in Cuba are now the most well-off segment of Cuban society. It used to be a long time ago, if a Cuban woman was gonna marry a farmer, there was like some sort of bad slang, oh, you know, marrying a farmer. Now it's like, wow, she's marrying a farmer, and that's like, you know, because they're the most successful economically and socially acknowledged group. Teachers are leaving scientists are leaving research positions and are becoming farmers because it's a better deal. So it's fascinating to you know, all the people you meet farming.
I have another follow-up to that, nuts and bolts, the practicalities. How does that work? The farmers don't bring it directly to the senior center for the senior meals. So what kind of conduit is there? And the flip side is, how is that mandated by the government? Is it mandated? And how is it put into effect? And how does it work? And again, the reason why is we want to start brainstorming on real practicalities. Maybe we in our community, I'm not talking about government mandates from either Montpelier or the select board, but if we could, you know, maybe start thinking of modeling how your chickens and your carrots get eventually to the senior center and the kids. And as I said, I assume they don't give it directly, that there's some sort of conduit.
It depends on what part of Cuba. There's different situations in each locale. Some locales have aggregators. Well, they'll have a truck that'll go around and on a designated day and pick up, you know, the bananas and then the, you know, the mangoes, sounds great, right? And the papayas, and then, you know, the carrots, and then deliver it to the schools. So that, and who pays the aggregator, I don't know. Okay, you know, these are things I don't know. Some of the farmers, they're all in unions. There's various overlapping co-ops. And it could be that, you know, a particular farmer's co-op, that's what they're, you know, that's one of the things they do. You know, they've got a truck. Or they might hire a farmer who has a truck, because trucks are pretty rare in Cuba as a, you know, cars. Although farmers have their fair share of that now. So that's probably how it's done, but each locale is different. But I would say mostly it's and how it's mandated, I don't know. I think, you know, at least me looking at it, and I didn't ask that question, but, you know, the farmers keep on saying the social contract, that maybe it's a peer thing, you know, that, and these are small communities that they all know. We're getting from, you know, Farmer Manuel, we're getting, you know, he's contributing, and people know that, and there's a pride in that. And if it's mandated beyond that, I don't know, but that's how it seemed to me.
Well, I mean, I don't know anything about Cuba. I know that there are movies, but I haven't watched them. But it seems to me that the piece of the puzzle here is that people are buying local, and that there isn't the competition from other parts of the country the way that we have here, where we have the choice of buying from California instead of buying from you, and from buying, you know, like, I'm assuming that that's fundamental to what's happening there, is that people are just buying local because there isn't a huge alternative, right?
It's because when Cuba was completely cut off, I mean, they had no choice but to think this way, to start thinking about how to take care of each other. They were cut off from oil. I mean,
there is a shortage of vegetables. It's not paradise in Cuba. And food is dear. You know, they're not starving, they're eating. I was talking earlier, when the Soviet Union collapsed, I went into what they call their special period. The average Cuban lost 20 pounds during the 90s. That's how bad the situation was. The island came close to, you know, really starvation. And they've come back from that abyss, and there's nobody hungry now. But food is still held very dear, and vegetables are in short supply. They're there, but they're not as you know, relative to, say, the price of beans or rice. They're probably a little more expensive. But yeah, they are buying local to a degree. But some communities don't have, in Havana, it's hard to find fresh produce. There's one or two markets, but you just can't, it's not available as much as maybe I made it sound or people would think it sound. There's a lot of underground trading, going on from farmers, and there's a black market for eggs, okay? Which, anything protein is very short supply. Milk is in short supply. They don't have grazing land. There's very little really good land. They can't grow grain in Cuba, so they can't support big dairy farms. There's a lot of things that hopefully when the embargo ends that we really can help them with without destroying them. We'll see. But they have a lot of fundamental problems, but they're not starving. And they buy local because I have to. There's very few. There's no supermarkets, but it's not that easy to find, an abundance of vegetables in Cuba. Definitely not paradise.
I'd like to ask just one question. What is the cold storage facility like in this area now? And could it help address a lot of what we're talking about here?
A few years ago, somebody was coming around trying to see the idea of community cold storage. And I tried to flesh that out. What do you mean by this? Okay, who's driving this demand? Is it somebody, sitting in a room deciding this? I don't see that demand coming from the growers. The few farmers that I know who actually grow enough to store have cold storage. Harlow Farm, which is the biggest produce farm in the county, he's got plenty of storage. He doesn't need a community storage. So I haven't seen, I don't know where this, demand comes from. I have almost adequate storage, not great, it's been good enough, and I'm still selling some stuff out of it. I don't know, like, where do you locate it? Transportation, is it, it's an issue. Where are you gonna put this thing? And then farmers gotta bring it there, and then if they sell it, then they gotta go get it and bring it to, it's not an easy thing. I advocate farm-based storage, like we did. It's not expensive. We use a CoolBot, which is basically, it's a small computer that replaces the controls on a common air conditioner. So you could run it down to 36 degrees. So you could build an insulated room. You could go to Walmart, get a $200 air conditioner, and you don't need fancy compressors. You could build yourself a walk-in cooler, and that's what we did.
So I raised that issue only that if farmers, small farmers in our whole area, are throwing away food because of lack of ability to store it, that's why I raised it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who's throwing away because they can't store it. They might be throwing away because there's no market. Like, I mentioned the daikons. I still have daikons, It's like, I overgrew. Our sales on daikons this year were down compared to last year. We thought, wow, daikons. Well, I don't know. It's the way, how do you predict what people are going to want from you or daikons? It's not potatoes. Potatoes are a little more, straightforward. It was one of those things. So I'm not sure what I don't have an answer for that.
Just as sort of news about what's going on, last year our legislators were all slapping themselves on the back and congratulating themselves about raising the minimum wage to $10 an hour, when most of the rest of the country is starting to look at 12 and 15. But now this year, they turned right around, and this is coming out of the House Economic Committee, and are proposing to change the definition of employee so that they can be called contract labor, which would then make them ineligible for some or more benefits. And that committee, by the way, has a couple of local reps, and if you run into them, you should speak to them. Laura Sibilia from Wardsboro and Valerie Stewart from here, our own District 3 in Brattleboro. District 1. But it's just I mean, this is our own legislature that is proposing to build economic development by lowering the wages in the state to make it more appealing to employers.
Ellen, you had your hand up.
I guess I was just gonna say a couple of things. One was echoing something that Vicky said about the fight for 15, to get the minimum wage up to 15. Like, it seems like not only does that begin to address the problem of poverty, $15 an hour is still a struggle, but it also begins to address the issue that Sabine raised, because the more money that people are making, the more money they actually can put back into the local economy. So that it seems like, to me, it seems like a no-brainer if we actually want people to be putting money into the local economy, that they actually need to be earning enough to do that rather than go for the dollar meal or whatever it is. And then the other thought I had was that before we got into the whole thing about Cuba, Howie said something about, like, this is a room full of smart, like, people are coming up with really smart ideas, and why are we, why are we having this conversation over and over again, was sort of where I went in my mind.
We're not politically powerful.
That's,
I mean, it
yeah,
gets back,
exactly.
we're a little echo chamber in a little room,
Yeah.
and you know.
And alone, none of us ever will be that unless we're working together, we just don't have, the people sitting in this room, I think, don't have the power and influence to make the kind of
We
changes.
have wallet power, you know.
Yeah.
We have wallet power. We have somewhat
But
power.
I just think we need to be working together, or we'll never be able to make the changes that we're all sort of sitting here hoping for and envisioning.
Well, thank you for that lead-in, Ellen.
I didn't
It
mean to
wasn't
lead
planned,
in.
but I was hoping we could kind of conclude today by talking about maybe some specific things that we could do, actions that people sitting in this room possibly could do. I mean, one thing you mentioned, Vicky, is this hunger, what's it called?
Hunger Council?
Hunger Council. It sounds, is that the kind of thing that would help address the issue of power that we've kind of talked about, where numbers banding together would help bring about some change?
I think so. What do you think?
I think it could. I think that it maybe doesn't have that form right now, but I think that it's one of the places where there's a lot of potential.
There's a lot of potential.
I think the food systems that we work within, particularly when we start talking about poverty in the community, are the most fragmented systems that we have. There's been a lot of focus in other areas. So, for example, low-income housing, there's certainly that issue is not well enough in any way, but there's been a lot of focus on it. But food systems, there hasn't been that focus on. So we serve meals in a variety of places, and we support people with food in a variety of places. And instead of coming together to be able to collectively address issues, which then allows us perhaps that political power to take next steps, we're still in this position. So I think that the Hunger Council can begin to address some of those things.
And we do have select board members of the Hunger Council, so they're listening. And there was a policy committee that disbanded because nobody was interested in taking over. I've just sort of re-engaged with the council, so I'm hoping to restart the policy committee. So that's definitely an avenue. The Workers Center is a great place to join in the fight for 15.
Where?
The Vermont Workers Center.
Where's that?
Ellen can probably say more about it since she's the director.
So it's a statewide organization. The local office is in the Root Social Justice Center at 28 Williams Street. Are you writing things down, like, for people to contact?
Well, what I'm thinking of doing, I was gonna throw it out to the group here to see what they think about it. First of all, I agreed to sort of write up the results of this meeting for the May edition of the Co-op's Food for Thought, okay? An article that the Shareholder Forum monthly tries to have an article. So that's one place I could kind of publicize these ideas potentially, these things now.
And the other thing I'll just say briefly is, like, one of our big campaigns has been for healthcare as a human right, which addresses the issue that Howie brought up about lack of access to medical care in general, but particularly dental has been in the surveying we've been doing in the community, the surveys I've personally done, dental has come up in nearly every single case, even people who have good health coverage for other things. So that's another area that we're working on. And in April 1st to May 30th, we're having a big convention in Montpelier, bringing together people who are concerned about many different issues, so climate justice, food justice, racial justice, economic justice, to try to think of together about how we can sort of pool our resources so that we're working together rather than working at sort of in our little silos.
But is this all under the umbrella?
This is all
of-
under the umbrella of the Worker Center. I'm trying to
Worker
give you a
Center,
little
okay.
summary
All
of
right.
what it is we're
Okay.
about.
Okay, good, thank you.
There's another resource in town. It's been here a few years. I don't know if Chris would say that the time trade is still helping you very much, but if they could help you any more, there are hundreds of people who would respond more by being given options that sound so creative or useful or inviting. I would have to look it up, I'm not sure, but I think their board meeting is this Thursday in this room. But regardless, any of you could attend that board meeting and say, I'm really interested in what I heard about your paradigm. I understand what you post for members and even on a public page, but members update constantly what their needs are, and it's a column called requests. It's like a yellow pages. All, I would like this, I need this, I'm looking for this, is listed in the yellow pages under different categories of requests, and likewise, offers. So the matchmaker idea is you're on your own, figure out if somebody's offering something, do you need it? Hey, I'm glad I showed up on the website. Or, oh, look what somebody needs. Any of you could post on this thing.
Help me understand though, you said, Chris, that you actually,
Yeah, I use what's it, the Brattleboro Time Bank is what it's called.
Time trade.
Time trade, yeah, okay, time, and
All right.
your hours go into a bank, and you can spend them by hiring someone to do an hour's worth of work for you. And you have all your skills listed.
right, and I can see how you would benefit, but I'm not sure I understand how you,
We offer, for every hour, we offer a meal.
Yeah, but that reciprocity isn't part of the formula. If you do something for Chris and you get credit for 5 hours a week, you can go to a massage person and say, I'd like to give you anything you need for a massage. Would 5 hours do for one massage, or what's your price? Or, technically, historically, it's supposed to be, I'd like to give you an hour for an hour massage. But all the resources there can be very much elevated when you get to where, instead of our own comfort needs or convenience offers, what I think I can do, which is not as important as finding out that somebody across town needs some help moving. Well, there's a fleet of trucks available, but not enough arms. But everybody with a truck could be listed in their yellow pages under help for moving if you need. And believe me, when you move and you don't have to ask Avis if there's a truck available and what the hell it's gonna cost your wallet, and the price fluctuates or they're not available, you got help in your own community, and that's a really good basic thing. We could come up with lots of basic things that nobody's even thought of.
So, maybe what Jesse's pointing to, for example, and I'm thinking, well, how could this be even expanded? So, you, Chris, can post more often to get more volunteers, to get more labor for people who would be interested not only in helping Meals on Wheels in order to get more hours credit, but being part of a solution for the hunger problem, for meal insecure people. And I wonder if, if Time Trade, being an existing organization and resource in the community, and maybe this is what Jesse is getting at, besides the specifics of members of Time Trade, can use it to get more labor for example, or other things, or help. Maybe time trade could be utilized as a clearinghouse or as a resource.
Or as a conduit.
For a conduit for some of these other ideas also, since it exists already, just as, Vicky, your forum exists already, and that's the best idea of how we could jump off on these ideas, is to get onto that bandwagon already, get more people power there, get more ideas and see how we could attack the hunger issue. I'm not sure, but maybe time trade also, as an existing resource in the community can be, maybe there are suggestions how it can be used for some more of these ideas.
The members live in all of the surrounding parts of the area and would join if they thought, wow, that's a really great request that I'd like to meet. And look at all more of what the offers available are. We pool our resources so it not only doesn't come out of our wallet, but we open up more of our assets.
I just have a question. I'm wondering if either Rhianna or Vicky could let us know, when does the Hunger Council meet? Is it just open to anybody in the community who wants to come?
Yeah. Yep.
And what do they do
Well,
besides meet?
they meet, they bring up issues. Our last meeting was about seniors and this current state of seniors in Windham County, and so we all sort of had our eyes open to what's actually going on and how many seniors are living in poverty. And then, we come up with solutions together as best as we can, which is not always easy. But there's a lot of, out of any meeting, any organization I've ever been a part of, it is the most heartwarming, welcoming, amazing community that I've ever been a part of. There's a lot of really good people trying to figure this out and speaking very directly with each other, which I don't find in professional settings very often, where you talk openly and honestly. Do you want to say anything else?
I think you did a great job.
It's the Windham County
It's the
Hunger
Windham,
Council?
yeah, and they've just expanded, so I think there are 10 hunger councils across the state.
And is it modeled on even a nationwide thing, or this is another specialness of Vermont?
I believe this is a specialness of Vermont, but
Good enough
I'm
for
not.
me.
It's
maybe-
moderated by Hunger Free Vermont.
Yeah,
Great.
it's Hunger Free Vermont. I guess I didn't mention that.
Another thing I wanted to try to get in before we break here is, any ideas anybody has about what, as I said, our shareholder forum wants to be able to put on sessions like this about things that the community would find of value. And I'll throw out an idea for you and see if anybody thinks this is a good idea. We've identified 3 existing organizations, the Hunger Council, Vermont Workers Center, and Time Trade. And I'm wondering if we put on a session like this where we had those 3 organizations and maybe others that I haven't thought of right now, where they came and talked about specifically, number one, what they do, but then how the community could better use what they do to address the issues we talked about today in this meeting. I mean, is that worthwhile doing? Pulling these organizations together and sort of acting as a way to more collaboration instead of worthwhile venture.
I think the Hunger Council isn't an organization. It's a meeting of a lot of organizations already.
Okay, so it's already a collaboration.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any other ideas about things we might be able to, the shareholder forum might be able to put on like this, that would be of value to our community?
Well, I had a question that I would ask a shareholder, or I'll ask it here. When I looked into this food justice certification and I spoke with the national chairman, where we happened to be in Cuba together, and I said, is there any positive result for the farmers who become certified? And is it a legitimate criteria to raise the question to the stores that I deal with, that they should be addressing who they're buying from and the wages and just the conditions and whether the farmers or producers or whatever are meet standards. And they said, yeah, absolutely. It's a legitimate criteria to ask of buyers in stores that they should be asking their vendors questions. It's a legit, and how they decide to buy, it's a legitimate criteria that they should be asking and favoring those who meet the criteria. And I raise it because of where we are, and I just think it's I personally think, but I think co-op members at the shareholder meeting, it's a question. Is it a legitimate criteria? You know, okay, we ask farmers if they're organic or this. Is it legitimate criteria to determine who the co-op buys from, as whether or not they are meeting worker, standards? Is that a legitimate question that, to ask?
So that's actually giving me a thought, and that could be a topic for a whole meeting.
Yeah.
The other thought that I'm having listening to that is, there's certain labeling terms that get thrown around, like organic or local. And as consumers and co-op, I'm a co-op member, co-op shopper, I don't really always know, I've heard you speak at other times, Howie, about local can mean a lot of different things. So sort of what's behind some of that terminology, I think could be an interesting topic, and it might be together with that, or it could be a separate one, but just, pulling the curtain back and so what do we really mean when we're talking, this stuff Joe was bringing up about what is really organic?
Right, well then you get into, because as far as the big label stuff, if you look into it at all, you'll be shocked as what passes to qualify as an organic dairy, out west. If the cows could see pasture, that's that passes, Well, they let them out one door and they bring them back in the other door, they've taken their walk. And the same thing with, the whole thing with free range chicken, our chickens are encaged. Well, no, they're not encaged, but they're stuffed into a room, and stuff. So what is real? What is reality? And no, but what does the label mean? I totally get it. What is local? Is local, a mile? Is it 100 miles? I've been into stores, when you see ads in the flyers, local New England grown. Well, depends, how New England's a big area. Does that really mean local? To me, local means if I could drive there and get a cup of coffee, that's a local place that's local. If I can't drive there to get a coffee, it's not local anymore. So that's my criteria. But I think that'll be an outcome.
There is actually a state definition that the Department of Agriculture does use for local, which is within the state and 30 miles thereafter, beyond the border.
Yeah, I was
Depending on how far you want to.
Well, that's, it could be, it could be.
You had that. Yeah.
So, one of the main things that was brought up in terms of action was about raising the minimum wage to 15. Besides the Vermont Worker Center, are there any other major organizations in our state that are working on that? Does anyone know of anyone else who's working on that besides the Vermont Worker Center?
The Progressive Party.
Okay. No other. Okay.
How many you need?
Well, we
Well,
need everybody.
I'm just wondering if they're the only game in town besides the Progressive Party.
All right, well, we're just about out of time. I really appreciate it. I really thank the panel. I think you did a really nice job. Again, thank you, Kathy, Kathleen, and Joe for putting together the food. And please, before you go, if you take some food, because we still have quite a bit left.
Thank you for
moderating.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you all. And thank you, CCTV, for being here today, too. It's really great.
One grain of sand plus one